Hagrid has become one of the most lovable and well-known characters in the Harry Potter universe, and for good reason too. Not only was he a character that J.K. Rowling created on day one of starting the Harry Potter series, but he also is the first mentor Harry has in the wizarding world. But how he is portrayed in the films is slightly different to what we get in the books, especially during our first encounter with him. For example, his quick temper shows through quite a bit more in the book than what we get in this scene of the movie, which might be a nod to his giant ancestry, which is another part of the wizarding world that the movies completely omit. Sure, later we get to meet Grop, Hagrid's giant half-brother, but the films totally leave out Hagrid's trip to the Giants during the last couple of books, as well as his entire scandal with the public finding out that a teacher at Hogwarts is part giant. And although I will cover these omissions in more detail in future episodes of this series, the scene we are covering today is the first snowflake in the eventual snowball that is Hagrid's character and plot changes. So stick around as I go through all the changes between this scene in the movie and its corresponding chapter in the book. We will get to see Hagrid's true temper, learn more about the letter from Hogwarts, and see how Harry learns about how he got his scar during this moment, not later on as shown in the movie. My name is Gibby, and welcome back to episode 3 of Movies vs. Manuscripts Harry Potter Edition. This is the show where I analyze your favorite fantasy franchises and compare the adaptations to the originals. This week, we're covering one scene of the movie in which Harry meets Hagrid, the Keeper of the Keys. This might be a short moment in the film, but it takes up a whole chapter in the book, as there is quite a bit of dialogue that is cut from the movie. So today, strap in as I uncover Hagrid's history, how he came to be such an important figure in the wizarding world, and most importantly, all the differences between this scene and the chapter. Typically, as you know, I would cover changes across 4 categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But today, we really don't have any location or timeline differences, so I will only be going over a couple of character changes and then of course the many plot changes to this scene. But first, let's kick things off with a brief refresher of what happens during this scene in the movie. Last week, we left off with Harry counting down the seconds until his birthday, and as soon as the clock strikes midnight, there is a loud bang on the door outside. Seen as they're on a rock in the middle of the sea during a raging storm, this freaks out all the inhabitants of the shack. Suddenly, the door comes off its hinges and slams down to the ground, and a large man ducks down to fit through the door. Mr. Dursley demands that he leaves, but the giant hairy man walks over and bends the barrel of the shotgun Vernon is holding and says, "Dry up, Dursley, you great prune." Vernon fires the gun, but it only hits the ceiling since the barrel is bent. The giant man then walks over to Dudley, thinking that it's Harry, but he quickly finds out who the real Harry is as he steps out from behind the fireplace. The man presents Harry with a cake that says happy birthday and then plops down on the couch in front of the fire and uses his umbrella to send flames into the fireplace. Everyone watches in shock at what just happened, and Harry asks the man who he is. He replies that his name is Rubeus Hagrid, and he is the Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts. After realizing that Harry doesn't know what Hogwarts is, or what he is, Hagrid says the famous line of, "You're a wizard, Harry." Harry is of course shocked and confused, denying that he could be a wizard, but Hagrid convinces him by asking if he's ever made something strange happen when he's angry or scared. Harry realizes that Hagrid is right, and Hagrid hands him his letter from Hogwarts that his uncle and aunt have been keeping away from him for so long. Harry reads the acceptance letter from Hogwarts, and finally Vernon speaks up saying that he won't allow Harry to go. We then get a little bit of context from Petunia about her sister Lily, and she ends it by saying how Lily and her husband got blown up, which comes as a big surprise to Harry. Mr. Dursley then insists that Harry will not be going, and he insults Albus Dumbledore, which, as you know, is a big no-no in front of Hagrid. In retaliation, Hagrid causes Dudley, who's eating Harry's cake at the moment, to grow a pig's tail, and the Dursleys run away upstairs in astonishment. Hagrid and Harry then head out the door, and Harry officially embarks on his journey into the wizarding world. Like I said before, there isn't much to cover as far as timeline and location, so both of those get a pass. This scene and its corresponding chapter both take place on this shack in the middle of the sea, and timeline-wise, there's nothing of note other than the book having this interaction be a little bit longer than what's shown in this scene. So let's jump right into character differences so that we can get to our plot changes. As mentioned, there aren't many characters missing. The people we see in the scene are obviously the Dursleys, Harry, and Hagrid, but in the book there are a few other people mentioned. The most notable person we get to hear the name of again is Minerva McGonagall, as she is the one who signed the acceptance letter from Hogwarts. But there are a few additional names that I won't mention specifically because they don't really get brought up again, but I wanted to mention the context for you. When Hagrid explains who Voldemort is, yes, he does that now, and we'll get to that in the plot changes, he mentions multiple wizarding families that Voldemort killed. I believe he names like 3 or 4. He does this while trying to explain that nobody survived once Voldemort decided to kill them. Nobody except Harry. Besides McGonagall and these few wizarding couples that Hagrid mentions, there aren't any other character differences in this chapter. So that means we can move on to the plot changes. As we go through these changes, I want to give some context to Hagrid's background, as it helps us better analyze and understand the thematic differences between J.K. Rowling's writings and the movie's take on events and characters. So before we jump into the present moment of this scene, let's quickly cover Hagrid's upbringing and how he ended up in his position at Hogwarts. Also, quick reminder that you can snag a free copy of the audiobook version of The Philosopher's Stone, or any other book you want, using my Audible link in the description. It will give you a free trial, no purchase necessary, and it supports the channel at the same time. Follow along with me as I do this series, and enjoy the wizarding world in a whole new way by signing up for Audible today. Alright, back to the episode. Hagrid is half human and half giant, as his mother was the giantess Fridwolfa. His mother left his father and Hagrid at the early age of 3, and then his father passed away during Hagrid's second year at Hogwarts. As we know from the Chamber of Secrets, Hagrid took on a pet acromantula and eventually was expelled for it when Tom Riddle framed him for being the heir of Slytherin, who opened the Chamber of Secrets in 1943. By the way, you might now be thinking, Hagrid got expelled from Hogwarts in 1943? Yep, Hagrid was born in 1928, making him nearly 63 years old during this scene in the movie. Anyway, after his expulsion from the school, Dumbledore, who always believed him to be innocent, convinced the then headmaster Armando Dippet to keep Hagrid on at the school as a trainee for the position of groundskeeper. Hagrid, an orphan at this point, would have had nowhere else to go, and this was one of the first factors in his extreme loyalty towards Dumbledore. In a couple of years when he came of age, he took on the role of Keeper of Keys. This meant that he was responsible for the security of the gates and led students to and from the castle, which is why he leads the first years to the castle every year. After the death of the gamekeeper in 1968, Hagrid took on the position full-time, and a couple years later he joined the Order of the Phoenix during Voldemort's first reign of terror. That is how he got entrusted with the task of retrieving Harry in 1981. Of course, you know the rest from there, but that helps us understand a little more of who this integral character really is. He is a lovable, loyal, and brave character who suffers from a lack of education and an unfortunate framing by a young Lord Voldemort. And although we can easily view Dumbledore as Harry's primary mentor throughout the series, it is really Hagrid who is with Harry from the start, during each adventure, and with him even at the end as Voldemort has him carry Harry's thought-to-be-dead body into Hogwarts. J.K. Rowling herself notes Hagrid as one of the most central characters to the story, written on day 1 of creating the series. So this made me wonder, as I started this YouTube series, how would the book be different from this first encounter Harry has with a man who will become one of the most important people in his life? It had been a while since I read the book, so I figured they'd be quite similar, but boy was I wrong. That being said, let's dive into each difference between this scene and the chapter in the book, starting with Hagrid's entrance. First, Hagrid's entrance doesn't start as confrontational as shown in the movie, however, it does eventually get there. When he first comes into the shack, he goes to the couch, sits down, and asks for some tea. This is very typical Hagrid, starting out as friendly and assuming the best of everybody, but then getting upset when someone really puts him to it. Second, when he does bend the gun, it never actually gets fired as shown in the movie. In fact, Hagrid actually takes the gun out of Mr. Dursley's hands and ties the barrel in a knot, then tosses it in a corner. Next, Hagrid never mistakes Dudley for Harry. He also doesn't light a fire with his wand as clearly shown in the movie. He goes up to the fireplace, blocking the view of everyone watching, and when he backs away, there's suddenly a roaring fire there. Another change that has to do with that fire is that he doesn't immediately start the conversation with Harry, but actually digs through his many coat pockets and pulls out some sausages and a tea kettle and begins cooking. And speaking of his coat, the movie shows a rather normal coat with a couple of pockets, but the book describes the coat as essentially being entirely made up of pockets. And there's more than just a tea kettle, sausages, and a happy birthday cake in there. So next up in the movie, we have the moment of Hagrid saying, "You're a wizard, Harry." But a few things happen first in the book before this line is spoken. Hagrid asks Harry a series of questions to figure out how much he really knows. By asking numerous questions, he realizes Harry doesn't know a single thing. He doesn't know he's famous, he doesn't know what Hogwarts is, and he doesn't even know that he's a wizard and so were his parents. Hagrid then gets extremely angry at the Dursleys, as he said that he was warned he might have trouble picking Harry up from these people, but he never expected this level of insanity. Mr. Dursley then tells Hagrid that he forbids him from telling Harry anything, which only makes Hagrid more furious. And that is when he finally says, "You're a wizard, Harry," and hands him his letter from Hogwarts. Next up, Harry reads the full letter in the book, which is quite formal and is signed by Minerva McGonagall. Plus, before Harry can even give a clear answer, Hagrid pulls a real-life owl out of one of his coat pockets, along with a long quill and some paper, and he writes down that he and Harry will be going out soon to get his things for Hogwarts. He then gives the letter to the owl and tosses it out into the raging storm. Obviously, this surprises the Dursleys and Harry. So far, I think you can tell that we're getting a feel for who this giant man is, and also getting our first glimpse at some of the wizarding world, which includes these owls delivering letters. One moment Hagrid is nice and asking for tea, the next he's bending the barrel of a shotgun and yelling at Mr. Dursley, and then the next he's answering Harry's letter for him without even asking Harry what he wants to do. It's all very Hagrid. The next notable change is in regards to Hagrid's account of Harry's origin story, which the movie saves for after Harry's trip through Diagon Alley. But in the book, Hagrid fills Harry in on who he is right from the start. After Aunt Petunia goes on her tangent about her sister and how they got blown up, and Harry is shocked by this revelation of his parents' death, he asks Hagrid what really happened. Hagrid is hesitant, but then he explains who Voldemort was, all the people he killed, and how Harry is the only one who ever survived an attack from him. We also get another taste of how epic Dumbledore must be, because Hagrid mentions that Hogwarts was the only safe place during those dark days, and Dumbledore was the only person Voldemort ever feared. The next change is a much smaller one, which is that Dudley never eats the cake. In fact, earlier on when Hagrid was making sausages, Vernon tells Dudley that he's not allowed to eat anything that man makes. But we'll still get the moment of Vernon insulting Dumbledore, Hagrid getting angry, and Dudley growing a pig's tail. The only change is that Hagrid tells Harry he messed up the spell, as he meant to turn Dudley into a pig entirely, not just give him a tail. Just like in the movie, he asks Harry not to tell anyone, but unlike in the movie, Harry asks him why he can't do magic. We actually learn in this moment of the book that Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts, and he tells Harry that they snapped his wand. But when Harry asks why, Hagrid refuses to go any further. Of course, we get the answer in the next book, but for now, this is where our changes end. I realize as I'm going through these differences that it's hard to explain the temperament changes between movie Hagrid and book Hagrid. In the movie, he is definitely portrayed as a lovable oaf of sorts, whereas in the book, he has a lot more back and forth dialogue with Vernon, fueled by his anger about the situation. You can tell that he cares deeply for Harry, even though he hasn't been involved in his life. Probably because he was the one who dropped Harry off those many years ago, and because he would have been close with Harry's parents. But either way, the Hagrid we get in the books is quick-tempered and loyal to a fault, not just some mushy giant with a love for strange creatures. So what do you think about these changes? Do you agree with how they portrayed Hagrid in the movie compared to the books? I'd love to hear your thoughts below in the comment section, and make sure to like and subscribe to support this series and stay up to date with each release. As always, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode.